I wish to make a contribution on behalf of the Labour Party related specifically to Section 13 of the Financial Emergencies in the Public Interest No. 2 Bill 2010, which proposed to reduce the minimum wage by €1 from €8.65 to €7.65, and thereby amend Section 11 of the National Minimum Wage Act 2000. As most people know, I have been privileged to serve as chairperson of the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Enterprise, Trade and Innovation for the past 3 years. And during that period, I have been extremely facilitative in terms of accommodating various interest groups and presentation committee over the intervening years. And that includes representatives of the various industries, including the services sector, the health sector and restaurant sectors. In this context, whilst the various groups have made reference to the minimum wage, it was never elevated, in my opinion, to the level of it being of absolute and crucial importance that it be reduced. Of what was greater import in the context of their submissions was that the GLCs and REAs and EROs need to be addressed, modernised, especially to reflect the current, the conditions where Sunday work might well be part of the weekly commitment and might not attract premium payments in current circumstances, which is a totally different concept of what prevailed when these agreements were negotiated and where there was no such thing as working on Sunday. There are areas which certainly can be reviewed and looked at and modified and updated to take account of current circumstances. But this proposed cut, which is a result of the government's decision itself, indeed for a while they tried to offload the blame for this decision to the shoulders of Measures Wren and Chopra. Of course, this is untrue, but the proposal to cut the minimum wage by up to 12% is proof positive that the least well-off and most vulnerable are fair game as far as this government is concerned. And whilst I'm worried about the recital in the bill, at page 3, which indicates whereas the state is evading of financial assistance programmes provided by the European Financial Stabilisation Mechanism and the European Financial Stability Facility and the International Monetary Fund, and it is necessary to take the measures in this Act as part of a range of measures provided for in this programme to address the economic crisis in the state. That would appear to be elevating it to the fact that, this was part of the agreement with the IMF and the EU and everybody else. And I would like clarification on that, because this is putting it out that it had to be done as part of the agreement. My understanding is that it was not proposed by those gentlemen as part of the negotiations, and therefore the government indicated that any future government was in no worse position and they weren't circumscribed. This would appear to be that it would be circumscribed in the context of that. So I want clarification in relation to that in that context. Cutting the minimum wage makes absolutely no sense at any level. It undermines the social floor on which people are struggling already to survive. The hardship that such a cut would impose and will cause would be very significant for the households who rely on a minimum wage employment and would clearly act as a disincentive to work. There is no evidence whatsoever that such a cut will create a single job, but there is ample evidence that it will increase poverty and hardship for many families. When you add in the universal social charge, which the Labour Party leader Eamon Gilmore TD referred to in the Dáil this morning, this will mean in some cases that people at work are worse off than those who have their jobs ended and lost their jobs. This in itself, of course, will accelerate a call for further cuts in welfare and deeper impoverishment of a very large section of our community. Basically, this is presaging a race to the bottom. Just 52,000 people, or approximately 4.2% of the workforce, are earning at or close to the minimum wage. So not everybody is just wearing a minimum wage. Some of them are earning less because of under 18s and various exemptions that are involved as well. So that to argue that it will significantly add to our competitiveness simply does not stand up to any objective scrutiny. This measure will not reduce the fiscal deficit by 1 cent, but is clearly part of a neoliberal orthodoxy that should be anathema to all fair-minded and fair-thinking people. On 24th November, after the government 4-year plan was published, we in the Labour Party stated unambiguously that we would oppose this miserable proposal tooth and nail. And I want to reiterate unequivocally the Labour Party position. We would not countenance any reduction in the minimum wage, and we will not implement such a measure if we are a part of any future government. A full-time employee working 40 hours per week on a minimum wage earns €346 per week, or €18,092 per year, which is certainly a low income. And remember, as I said, there are reductions for those under 18 or in their first job, so it's even lower. And amongst EU states, it ranks as 12th highest when measured as a percentage of average monthly wages, and 9th highest if measured in terms of purchasing power parity. So reducing it by €1 per hour, or €40 per week, or €2,080 per year, reduces the annual wage income to €16,012, or €306 per week. And there has been no increase in the minimum wage since July 2007, so it's 3.5 years ago. We are already aware and are deeply concerned that about 116,000 workers, or 6.6% of the workforce, are living below the poverty line, and that the working poor make up 24%, or almost 1 in 4 of all those in poverty, and 40% of all those households in poverty. We are also aware that the minimum wage is especially relied upon for protection by women. Almost 6 out of 10 women who are in the workforce rely upon the minimum wage, and therefore it's absolutely of critical importance. And migrants and indeed other vulnerable workers whom we met today during the course of the presentation outside the gates of Dáil Éireann. We also acknowledge the importance of the role of the statutory minimum wage in protecting against unfair competitive advantage by unscrupulous employers who exploit their workers. So it's extremely important from this perspective and for putting in place, as I said, a social floor. Now, under Section 41 of the National Minimum Wage Act 2000, an employee in financial difficulty could apply to the Labour Court, citing their inability to pay if it is causing them extreme difficulties. But despite the Government's position in this regard as set out in the bill, this facility has never been invoked once by any employer. So therefore, if they were in difficulty, they had an opportunity in Section 41 of the National Minimum Wage Act to go there. They didn't use it. We in the Labour Party believe that a decent statutory-backed minimum wage is a statement of core values, providing a threshold of decency under which society agrees that workers' wages should not fall. And it's our view that the reduction or proposed reduction here tonight would signal a race to the bottom in which everyone, low-wage workers, public and private sector workers, social welfare claimants and indeed pensioners would suffer. What argument has been advanced to support the Government's logic that poverty wages will create more jobs and that welfare rates must be below even those poverty wages? Which logic, if you were to follow to its conclusion, will in turn require further reductions in social welfare payments in order to keep the race to the bottom going? Was there any cost-benefit analysis carried out in respect to this reduction? Because reducing the minimum wage will obviously increase demands for secondary benefits. Family income supplement will obviously have to come into play. It means a bigger more money will have to go out, and medical cards and all of those. So that is extremely important in that context. Minister, I just want to briefly, I know that the last quarter of the, in
2 minutes left.
In Section 1, you say that it doesn't affect current contracts. But I think, obviously we'll be opposing the bill tooth and nail, but I'd always doubt that, and I think if you're obviously going to have the numbers to vote this through, but I think there should be an amendment brought forward to make sure that Section 13 doesn't affect any right or privilege or obligation or liability acquired or accrued or incurred under the Act, so to ensure that people won't actually exploit any legislation that may be passed. And the other situation is, I find it peculiar that under Section 10 of the bill, before the 30th of June 2012 and every year after, that there's an annual review provided for every piece of this. But yet, peculiarly, Section 13 is excluded from that review. So why would you exclude the review of the minimum wage? In other words, it would never. And of course, the Labour Court has been taken out of the situation altogether. It's now going to be at the Minister. And very often, where are they going to get some of those values? So, I don't believe anyhow that anything. This is a very fundamental issue, and here we are rushing through with this piece of legislation with other legislative measures, and it obviously should require proper debate and assessment, and indeed be examined carefully in this context. And there's other areas in relation to it, but it doesn't contribute. I can't see how this contributes anything to competitiveness or to getting any extra jobs in this context. And I think that, Minister, it's a major mistake, and it's one that the Labour Party certainly will not be party to implementing in any future government.